Hello friends, welcome to today's lecture on question banks. We'll do question banks from UWorld. So let's start. In this question, a 24-year-old man comes to the clinic because of generalized weakness and fatigue, and he has also significant bruising on his trunk that is not associated with any trauma. No known medical problems, and he takes no medications. Temperature is 37.1, and also physical examination reveals conjunctival pallor and truncal ecchymosis. Lab studies reveal low hemoglobin. Creatinine is normal. Bone marrow aspiration is performed, which reveals aspirate to be grossly pale and histologically appears dilute due to high lipid content. This is the bone marrow aspirate shown. The key findings which we should note here is hemoglobin low, creatinine normal, and the bone aspiration description that indicates that the aspirate is grossly pale and it has a high lipid content. Also in this picture we can see that the bone marrow aspirate seems to be hypocellular. This indicates that there is some problem in bone marrow, whereas the kidney function is normal. So the problem is aplastic anemia, whereby due to malfunctioning of bone marrow, the bone marrow is not being able to produce a normal amount of RBCs and therefore leading to low hemoglobin count. Now further, the question asks that which of the following blood parameters is most likely to be elevated in this patient. So the patient is suffering from the aplastic anemia with normal kidney functions. So in cases where there is anemia and the kidney is functioning normally, then the kidney will try to compensate for the anemia by producing erythropoietin, and therefore the blood parameter that will be elevated in this patient will be erythropoietin. So this patient has fatigue, weakness, conjunctival pallor and decreased hemoglobin, all suggestive of anemia. Bruising not associated with trauma indicates thrombocytopenia. High lipid content of the bone marrow aspirate suggests hematopoietic cell aplasia or hypoplasia. He likely suffers from aplastic anemia, which is due to stem cell failure and actually affect all three cell lines, and it causes pancytopenia. As with most anemias, increased production of erythropoietin by the kidney in response to anemia-induced hypoxia would be expected given this patient's normal renal function, as the creatinine was normal. Thus, the answer was erythropoietin. The choice A was not correct because aplastic anemia is associated with pancytopenia, which will reduce the circulating eosinophils as well. In choice C, haptoglobin levels are typically normal. In aplastic anemia, haptoglobin is reduced in cases of intravascular hemolysis. Once free hemoglobin binds haptoglobin, the resulting haptoglobin hemoglobin complex is removed from circulation. And in choice D, serum iron is also usually normal in aplastic anemia. In choice E, elevated lactate dehydrogenase, particularly LDH1, is expected in patients with hemolytic anemia and not with aplastic anemia. In choice F, an increased reticulocyte index would be expected in hemolytic or hemorrhagic anemia, assuming the normal bone marrow function. So the reticulocyte is increased only in cases where the bone marrow function is normal. But here we see that this is the case of aplastic anemia. So the reticulocyte count will be low because there are few progenitor cells in the marrow. All in summary is that the triad of low hemoglobin, thrombocytopenia and absent hematopoietic cells in the bone marrow suggest of aplastic anemia. A compensatory increase in circulating erythropoietin levels would be expected in individuals with aplastic anemia and normal renal function. Please note that there should be a normal renal function. Now in this case, a 34-year-old woman comes to the office with a vague abdominal pain and she has no past medical history. Do not use tobacco or alcohol. Temperature is 36.7. On physical examination, there is right upper quadrant fullness and abdominal imaging reveals a dense liver mass. Angiography shows a well demarcated, highly vascularized tumor surrounded by normal liver parenchyma. Which of the following substances most likely contributed the most to the blood vessel development in this patient's tumor? This question is a direct question where the last line itself explains that what the answer should be. In this, the question is asking about the factor or the substance which is responsible for angiogenesis in tumor. And the answer to this will be fibroblast growth factor, which are responsible for angiogenesis. Now, this patient has a highly vascularized liver tumor, possibly a benign hepatic hemangioma. Angiogenesis or blood vessel formation is predominantly driven by following two substances. First is the vascular endothelial growth factor. Second is fibroblast growth factor. VEGF stimulates angiogenesis in variety of tissues, either being normal, chronically inflamed, healing, or neoplastic. As VEGF increases endothelial cell motility and proliferation, the new capillaries begin to sprout. Fibroblast growth factor 2 is produced by a wide range of cells and is involved in endothelial cell proliferation, migration, and differentiation, but it also appears to play an important role in embryogenesis by stimulating angioblast production. As a group, FGFs not only contribute to angiogenesis but also to the embryonic development, hematopoiesis, and wound repairing. In wound repairing by recruiting macrophages, fibroblasts, and endothelial cells to the damaged tissues. However, the laminin in basement membranes may pose a physical barrier to the sprouting of new blood vessels. It's an important point, please do remember. Other options were inappropriate, as in choice A, epidermal growth factor should not be confused with vascular endothelial growth factor, as epidermal growth factor has a mitogenic influence on epithelial cells, hepatocytes, and fibroblasts. It does not appear to play a role in angiogenesis. Insulin in choice C, insulin-like growth factor 1 or somatomedin C is synthesized predominantly by growth hormone influenced hepatocytes and serves to stimulate cell growth and multiplication. It does not appear to directly stimulate angiogenesis, but it can indirectly promote it by encouraging cell growth. In choices D and E, although the pro-inflammatory nature of interleukin-1 can induce the release of other pro-inflammatory cytokines that trigger cellular VEGF expression, IL-1 does not appear to directly stimulate angiogenesis. Similarly, although interferon gamma can indirectly promote neovascularization through activation of macrophages, but it does not appear to directly stimulate angiogenesis. Thus, it was not appropriate. So, in summary, the key growth factors that promote angiogenesis in neoplastic and granulation tissues are vascular endothelial growth factor and fibroblast growth factor. Pro-inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-1 or interferon gamma can indirectly promote angiogenesis through increased VEGF expression. The laminin in basement membranes may pose a physical barrier to the sprouting of new blood vessels. So this question asks, hypophosphorylated retinoblastoma protein is most likely to perform which of the following functions? So this retinoblastoma protein is a protein that is encoded by RB gene, where the R stands for retino, B stands for blastoma. RB gene is a tumor suppressor gene, and this actually inhibits the G1S transition. So, being the tumor suppressor gene, it is active when it is hypophosphorylated. Hence, the answer to this question will be prevention of the G1S cell cycle transition. So, this slide presents to you a detailed description of the previous question. Here it is saying that the cell cycle is defined as the sequence of events that separates one cell division from the next. It consists of an inactive phase, interphase, and mitosis. So the gap phase 0 or G0 phase is the stage in which the cell cycle is suspended. The cells are resting and they do not divide in this case. Next is the interphase, which comprises of 90% of the cell cycle and is the stage in which the cell prepares for Division. Interphase is subdivided into G1 phase, where there is synthesis of RNA, protein, lipid, and carbohydrate. Then the S phase, where there is DNA replication, and the G2 phase, when there is ATP synthesis. Next is mitosis, which is the stage in which the cell divides into the two daughter cells. At both the G1 to S phase transition and the G2 to M phase transition, the cell cycle can be stopped. These stages are called checkpoints and are regulated by cyclins and cyclin dependent kinases that screen for DNA damage or abnormalities. Cells with normal DNA are allowed to proceed through the checkpoint, while cells with damaged DNA trigger DNA repair mechanisms. If the DNA damage is too substantial to be repaired, then the cell undergoes apoptosis. The RB or retinoblastoma tumor suppressor gene is located on chromosome 13q14 and encodes a nuclear phosphoprotein that regulates the G1S checkpoint. RB protein can be in an inactive state when it is hyperphosphorylated and in active state when it is hypophosphorylated. The inactivated RB protein allows the cell to proceed through the G1 to S checkpoint. The activated RB protein, in contrast, stops the cell cycle. Abnormal phosphorylation of RB protein results in its inactivation, thereby allowing cells with damaged DNA to proceed through the G1S checkpoint and then divide. Mutations of the RB protein have been linked to retinoblastoma, osteosarcoma, breast adenocarcinoma, small cell carcinoma of the lung, and bladder carcinoma. Other choices were incorrect, as in choice A, the main inducer of apoptosis is the p53 protein, also described as the molecular policeman. In choice C, the RB protein does not activate receptor tyrosine kinase. In choice D, the RB protein does not oppose p53 activity. In choice E, BRCA1 and BRCA2 are the two of many DNA repair genes that have been identified. When mutated, these genes are associated with an increased risk of breast and ovarian cancer. So in this case, a 43-year-old Caucasian female complains of reduced energy and fatigue and is found to have hypochromic microcytic anemia. Her past medical history is significant for stable angina treated with metoprolol and aspirin. Iron supplementation is prescribed, and several weeks later a peripheral blood smear demonstrates numerous enlarged RBCs that appear blue on right Giemsa stain. The bluish color of these red blood cells is best explained by the presence of which of the following. So the key points to be noted here is a Caucasian female with suffering from hypochromic microcytic anemia and is given iron supplementation, after which the enlarged RBCs appear blue. So all this indicate that this patient suffered from hypochromic microcytic anemia, which is the most likely cause here is due to iron deficiency, and therefore she has been given iron supplementation, and due to this iron supplementation there is increased bone marrow erythropoiesis, leading to release of immature red blood cells which are known as reticulocytes, and thus these reticulocytes are appearing blue because they contain bluish cytoplasm and reticular precipitates of residual ribosomal RNA. So the bluish color is due to reticulocytes that contain precipitates of residual RNA, ribosomal RNA. Thus the answer is C. As I mentioned, this patient suffers from hypochromic microcytic anemia due to iron deficiency, and in individuals who are iron deficient and are undergoing on replacement therapy, they should experience hemoglobin level increment of approximately 2 gram per deciliter per week for first 3 weeks. This increase in hemoglobin results from enhanced erythropoiesis and the accelerated release of both immature RBCs and reticulocytes into the bloodstream. The reticulocytes is an immature RBC that is slightly larger and bluer than a mature RBC. It lacks a cell nucleus but retains a basophilic reticular mesh-like network of residual ribosomal RNA. The ribosomal RNA appears blue microscopically after the application of the right KIMSA stain. After spending a day or so in the bloodstream, the reticulocytes are transformed into the mature RBCs that have a lifespan of approximately 120 days. The other options were incorrect, as the blue color of the reticulocytes is not caused by hemoglobin precipitates or nuclear membranes or due to histones, mitochondria, or the Golgi apparatus. In summary, increased bone marrow erythropoiesis results in accelerated release of immature RBCs, that is reticulocytes, into the bloodstream, which contain bluish cytoplasma and reticular precipitates of residual ribosomal RNA. In this question, a 45-year-old woman comes to the office due to persistent back pain. She also had excessive fatigue, anorexia, unintentional weight loss over several past months, and this patient has no prior medical problems or no history of cancer in the family. And imaging reveals a lytic lesion in the T10 vertebral body. Analysis of the biopsy shows cell lineage with abnormally high replicative potential. A genetic study reveals a single nucleotide substitution causing an activating mutation. Which of the following genes is most likely involved in this patient's disease? So, in this question, the most important key word here is activating mutation occurring, which has led to the cancer in the woman. And to know whether the individual or the patient suffers from cancer, the main key point that should be noted is the unintentional weight loss. Now, on all of the following genes which has been listed here, only the TRAS gene is a proto-oncogene, whereas all the other are the tumor suppressor gene. So whenever there is activating mutation, it should always be in a proto-oncogene. Proto-oncogenes are such genes that promotes the formation of the cancer. So the activating mutation can only be in proto-oncogenes, whereas in tumor suppressor genes, the activating mutation would lead to the suppressing of the cancer. It will not promote the cancer. So in tumor suppressor gene cases, there should be an inactivating mutation. Thus, the answer to this question is C. So this slide presents to you the role of oncogenes and tumor suppressors in cancer development. When there is a proto-oncogene and there is active mutation of it, then it transforms into an oncogene where there is deletion or point mutation or gene amplification or chromosome rearrangement, leading to overproduced or hyperactive protein that further increases the cell growth and malignant transformation, finally resulting in cancer. Whereas when there is tumor suppressors, usually there is loss of function or mutation. That is, there is usually an inactivating mutation that leads to the formation of cancer in cases of tumor suppressor genes. Abnormal growth of neoplastic cells can arise due to mutation of either proto-oncogenes or anti-oncogenes, which is also known as tumor suppressors. Proto-oncogenes stimulate the cell proliferation, and their overexpression or amplification, that is an activating mutation of them, will lead to increased cellular proliferation and neoplastic growth. CRAS was a proto-oncogene and was therefore often activated in tumor cells, increasing the cellular response to mitogenic stimuli. In contrast, anti-oncogenes are tumor suppressors as they inhibit cellular proliferation. Their inactivation or loss of function mutation contributes to the tumor development. And the other APC, BRCA1, RB, and TP53 are all anti-oncogenes and therefore more likely to be inactivated in neoplastic cells. Now this table demonstrates some of the proto-oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes. So the proto-oncogenes are ABL, which is responsible for chronic myeloid leukemia or acute lymphoblastic leukemia, BRAF, which is responsible for melanoma, HER1, that is responsible for squamous cell lung cancer. BRAF can also lead to hairy cell leukemia, so please do remember this also. And HER2 is responsible for breast cancer and ovarian cancer, MEK for neuroblastoma if it is NMEK, and small cell lung cancer if there is LMEK. Then RAS for different kind of cancers, then cis gene and also TGFA gene. Anti-oncogenes are APC or beta-catenin, mainly responsible for familial adenomatous polyposis, then BRCA1 or BRCA2, DCC, NF1, RP, TP53, VHL, and also WT1. Now in this there is a table which shows some surface markers and other identifying features. So we have to tell that which of the following best identifies the malignancy with the largest proportion of primitive cells. So first talking about the first marker, that is TDT, that stands for terminal deoxynucleotide transferase. So TDT is a surface marker which is present only in extremely primitive cells of the lymphocytic lineage. So this should be positive for the primitive cells. Here it is positive only in case 3 and case 4. Thus the rest of the cases will automatically be deleted or will be excluded from our options. Now, the other marker CD34 is positive for both. Okay. Then the other cytoplasmic mu chains is negative for case 3 and is positive for case 4. Now, the absence of cytoplasmic mu chains indicates that this case 3 has the malignancy with the largest portion of primitive cells. So the correct answer is C. Of all the cell markers listed, terminal deoxynucleotide transferase or TDT is present only in extremely primitive cells of the lymphocyte lineages. It is the enzyme that is active when VDJ arrangement of the heavy chain variable domain genes is occurring, and it is responsible for mediating N nucleotide addition to the junctions of the gene segments. Of the two cases that are TDT positive, that is cases 3 and 4, one case, that is case 4, has successfully completed VDJ rearrangement and is therefore less primitive than the cells of case 3. Most B cell ALLs are pro-B cell types which would have the CD10 TDD markers but would not exhibit the cytoplasmic mu marker yet, as in case 3. Pre-B cells would exhibit cytoplasmic mu marker, as in case 4. CD34 is a sialomucin which is found on the surface of cells of hematopoietic origin, and therefore it is positive in all cases. Now in case 1, which was the choice A, it contains cells that have successfully rearranged the genes in the variable domain of the heavy chain and are producing cytoplasmic IgM heavy chains. But the TDT is no longer present, so this cell is more advanced than the cell in case 3. In choice B, which is case 2, it is composed of cells that have switched the isotype of antibody to IgG. Isotype switching requires the interaction of CD40 and CD40L on T helper cells. So this cell is quite mature, and B7 is a co-stimulatory molecule that is induced on B cells during the activation process and is likewise a mature B cell marker and not the immature. So this was not appropriate. In choice D, which is case 4, this includes cells that have successfully completed VDJ rearrangement but have not yet turned off TDT production. It is the next most primitive cell behind the cell described in case 3. In case 5, which is choice E, it is comprised of cells that are probably of the same maturational stage as those of case 2. These cells have probably switched isotype to another class of antibody other than that of IgG. So the important key points to be remembered is that TDT is used as marker for early stage T and B cell development in acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Second, TDT is an enzyme that works on early stages of lymphocyte maturation when rearrangements of the VDJ segments occur. Cytoplasmic mu chains become positive when the cells have successfully completed the VDJ rearrangement but did not turn off the production of TDT, as was in the case 4 in the previous previous question. So in this question, a 17-year-old boy is brought to the physician because of reddish urine. He recently has a sinus infection and received trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole. Lab studies shows decreased erythrocyte count, decreased hemoglobin, normal mean corpuscular volume. This all indicating that this is the case of normochromic normocytic anemia. Next, the total bilirubin is increased, the direct bilirubin is increased, and the lactate dehydrogenase is also slightly increased, with haptoglobin is decreased. All these four findings indicate that this is the case for hemolytic anemia. In all, it is normochromic, normocytic, hemolytic anemia. Now, the urine analysis shows 3 plus blood, 3 plus urobilinogen, negative proteins, leukocyte esterase and nitrite. But the urine microscopy shows no red cells. Now this suggests that there is no hematuria, but the reddish color of urine is due to hemoglobinuria. As the red blood cells are lysed, the hemoglobin is released, and this hemoglobin can be excreted via urine as hemoglobinuria, which can give the urine the reddish appearance. Further, the question says that numerous RBCs with distinct inclusions are seen on peripheral smear. So which of the following best describes the inclusions seen on peripheral blood smear? So a normocytic, normochromic, hemolytic anemia with a drug like trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole mentioned in this patient clinical presentation reveals that this is the case for G6PD deficiency, and thus the peripheral blood smear would describe the inclusions of denatured hemoglobin. So the correct answer is A, as the presence of increased unconjugated bilirubin and lactate dehydrogenase and low haptoglobin in the serum is highly suggestive of acute intravascular hemolysis, likely related to the sulfonamide ingestion. The reddish urine is most likely due to hemoglobinuria rather than hematuria, as no red cells were found in the urine. Positive blood on urine analysis reflects presence of RBCs, hemoglobin or myoglobin. Urinary urobilinogen is also increased. The peripheral smear showed characteristic red cells with inclusions of oxidized and denatured hemoglobin, which is also known as Heinz bodies. Their presence is indicative of glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency or G6PD deficiency, in which hemolysis occurs following exposures to oxidants or infections. Other conditions where Heinz bodies can occur are the thalassemias and other variants of unstable hemoglobins. The other options were incorrect, as in choice B, hemoglobin crystals may be seen in hemoglobin C or hemoglobin SC disease. The crystals are often hexagonal or rhomboid in shape. In choice C, Pappenheimer bodies are iron-containing dark blue granules found in right-stained red cells in patients with sideroblastic anemia. In choice D, Howell-Jolly bodies are nuclear remnants within red cells that are normally removed by the spleen. The presence of Howell-Jolly bodies indicates either absence of the spleen, that is surgical removal, or a non-functioning spleen. In choice E, ring forms can be present in red cells in patients with malaria or babesiosis. Additionally, Cabot rings are seen in megaloblastic anemia or lead poisoning. There is no indication of any of this disease in this patient, hence it was not the answer. So the important key points to remember is that G6PD deficiency often presents with acute episode of intravascular hemolysis on exposure to certain drugs or in association with infection. Next, the Heinz bodies are the denatured hemoglobin, very much important to remember, and it is the denatured hemoglobin RBC inclusion that is seen in acute hemolysis, which is related to the oxidative stress. Hemolytic anemia is indicated when there is increased unconjugated bilirubin, increased lactate dehydrogenase, and decreased haptoglobin and increased urinary urobilinogen present. Now, in this case, a 60-year-old woman comes to the physician because of weakness, fatigue, and bruising. Her pulse is 110 per minute, blood pressure is 100 upon 75 mmHg, respirations are 22 per minute. Physical examination shows pallor and petechial hemorrhages in the mouth. Lab studies show a marked increase in white cells with anemia and thrombocytopenia. A peripheral blood spare is shown. Which of the following complications is likely to occur when lysis of the cells induced by chemotherapy? Now, the peripheral blood smear shows the myeloid cells, mainly the lymphocytic cells with or rods, indicative of acute promyelocytic or acute myelogenous leukemia. On lysis of the cells, because of chemotherapy, it can lead to disseminated intravascular coagulation. So the answer to this question is A. As I mentioned, the structure this shows all rods, which is most likely diagnostic criteria for acute myelogenous leukemia type M3, which is acute promyelocytic leukemia. The all rods contain the enzymes normally found in azurophilic granules, example acid phosphatase, peroxidases, and esterases, and type M3 cells often contain numerous OR rods. When these patients are treated with chemotherapy, the rapid lysis of many of these leukemic cells may release enough enzymes to trigger disseminated intravascular coagulation, with all of its life-threatening sequelae. The retinoic acid alpha receptor gene, or RAR alpha, encoded on the long arm of chromosome 17, is expressed on hematopoietic cells and promotes their differentiation. Treatment with all trans retinoic acid, also known as ATRA, has greatly enhanced the outcome of patients with M3AML, promoting differentiation of the leukemic blasts into mature neutrophils and in many cases preventing initiation of DIC. Other options were incorrect, as in choice B, enzymatic fat necrosis can be seen with pancreatic enzymes release. In choice C, a monoclonal spike on electrophoresis and Rowlex formation is seen with multiple myeloma as a consequence of the increased serum immunoglobulin levels. In choice E, sickling of erythrocytes in sickle cell patients is most commonly initiated by cold, dehydration, and infections. Some important recap point is that the acute myelogenous leukemia type M3 characteristically has OR rods in the cytoplasm of the leukemic cells. The OR rods are composed of the enzymes which are found in the azurophilic granules. Rapid lysis of these cells during chemotherapy trigger DIC or disseminated intravascular coagulation. This is all for today. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please do subscribe and share.